All right, we're going to give City TV a moment to crank up the old reel, and we will say good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Thursday, October 12th meeting of the Santa Monica Rent Control Board. We'll have our call to order. We'll start with our roll call.
Commissioner Gwynn.
Here.
Commissioner Ivanov.
Here.
Vice Chair Leslie.
Here.
And Chair Foster.
Here. Thank you. All right, please join us in the salute to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, and as we call our meeting to order, I just want to draw folks who are in the room your attention to the windows. You might notice they're glowing a bright blue. I just don't want to let an opportunity to address the public pass without acknowledging the horrible violence that's going on in Israel and the attacks and the terrorism. And so I just want to acknowledge all of our city employees and staff, fellow board members, colleagues, and all Santa Monicans, our renters, our citizens, and anyone who's feeling threatened or sad or remorseful right now. And so we're just so sad and mourning with all of you and hoping for peace. All right, on with the show. And we thank the city for lighting up our building in a recognition of what's going on. So thank you for letting me have that moment of acknowledgement. What's that? All right, we are going to go on to item 5, approval of the minutes, and just take a moment to look those over. And when you have, I would love a motion to approve the minutes. All right. Oh, you got no screen. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes of the September 14th meeting.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. You've been voluntold. Second. All those in favor of approving the minutes say aye.
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 Aye. All right. Minutes are approved. One quick management note. We are going to move the administrative item that was, it's item public hearing, item 11A is going to be continued to a future meeting date. So if you were here to speak on item 11A, which I do not have any comments in the rack for item public hearing item 11A, which was going to be amendments to chapter 16, that will be continued at a future date. All right, moving on to item 6, special agenda items. Executive Director Condon, what do you have for us tonight?
Well, good evening, commissioners and members of the public who have joined us. I just have one announcement tonight, which is about the registration fees, which I've been making for the past few months. Earlier this week, we sent out the final invoice that we send on the registration fee bills. Any fees that are not paid by the end or by the due date of November 8th will then be referred to our legal department for collection. So this is the time for anybody who has not yet paid their 2023 or 2022 and 2021 registration fees to pay them. Otherwise, they will be, and we inform the people, we send a letter with the invoice informing them that that will be the action. And that's all I have this evening.
Can I make a note?
Commissioner Gwynn.
Yes, I just want to acknowledge that, as many of you probably know, the governor has signed numerous bills concerning housing. There's over 50 of them that he's signed. 2 of them I just wanted to make note of. One of them was AB 12. This one will drop the maximum security deposit that a landlord can get from a tenant from 2 months to 1 month. There are other issues in there, but that's the main one in the AB 12. And the other one is AB 1620, which was by our own representative in the Assembly, Rick Zabur, sponsored it. It was the Costa-Hawkins Rental Act, I believe. And I bring that out because our chair, Anastasia Foster, also had a lot to do with input into that bill, and so it was great that we had the success there. Excuse me. And maybe you want to mention what the bill was for, since you were the one that was.
Sure, and thank you for that. That's very kind. In brief, it's if someone is disabled or becomes disabled with a mobility disability and they live on an upper floor of a building that's not accessible, when the opportunity presents itself, they can now move downstairs to an accessible floor when a unit that's the same size or smaller becomes available, and keep the same rental rate that they were paying upstairs, thereby allowing the landlord to re-rent that unit at market, but letting the person move downstairs as an ability to age in place. And it's the first change to Costa-Hawkins in over 30 years. So, all right, cool. Well, thank you so much for that. That's it for item 6. Okay, we do have, we're going to move on to item 7, public comment. Requests from members of the public to speak to the board on matters that are within our jurisdiction, but that are not on the agenda tonight. And we do have one request to speak. That's Nancy Gordon. If you want to come over to the mic, you can have up to 3 minutes when you're ready to start. Sure.
First of all, I want to thank you greatly for that adjustment to Costa-Hawkins. That's just tremendous that you did that. That's excellent. Yeah, I had some questions about a property that I live at. It's in our lease that we're supposed to have. We have 15 units and 2 washers and 2 dryers. And I just moved there not too long ago, and the property management company's been really bad about making repairs, and we've been without a washer for going on 2 months now, so I didn't really know what my recourse would be. And then the other thing is, I know this doesn't have anything to do with the property management, but if you have some suggestions for me as to what I can do. There's been, as far as security issues in our neighborhood, there's been people making deliveries, and the people that live in the apartment give out the security code to the door because they order coffee to be delivered. I don't know why, because we live a block north of Wilshire. There's 5 coffee shops they can walk to, but they don't want to do that. And I just want to know what I could do. Is I don't like the fact that they give the security code out to the delivery people, because they go upstairs and they're tromping all around and knocking on doors. And maybe if you have a suggestion as to what I can do to let management know that, because part of the issue of having a security code is that outside people can't, who make deliveries, they'll just call the person. You know, I don't know why the person just can't leave the apartment, come downstairs and just pick it up at the door. So I guess that's pretty much it. And I want to thank you guys for everything you do.
Thank you so much for coming. And you and any landlord or tenant in town can call the rent board and talk to staff anytime and have questions like that answered directly by our information staff. We're not allowed to respond up here to public comment.
Okay.
And a member of staff is in the audience. If you want to avail yourself of her, you can actually lean over and whisper to her what you have in mind.
Yeah, because you guys got rid of your phone system with all the extensions.
No, it's the same phone number. 8911.
Well, I'm confused because they said you just call 311, because I called about something else.
Right.
Oh, no, the
No,
rent board has
right.
its own.
No, we did not, we're not part of the 311 system within the city, so you can still call our lines directly or send us an email. But our direct line is 310-458-8751. But information analyst Amelia Platas is here, and I'm sure she'd be happy to talk with you about your questions.
Okay, that's great. So you guys are still like the 20th century where you can call and somebody answers.
Yes,
Yeah,
we
that's-
have
Yes.
somebody answer our phone, yes.
Yeah, because it's very bizarre that the city is I've never heard of a city getting rid of their phone system, and I was put through all kinds of hoops, but you're separate and apart from that. So that's just tremendous that you're still part of the 20th century. The human will answer.
Thank you, Ms. Gordon.
Thank you very much.
All right, take care. Have a good night. All right. Moving on to item 10A. 1, we have an exemption application for 830 Maple Street. May we have a brief staff report?
Yes, good evening, Commissioners. Mr. Tyler McLean is the applicant. He's the owner of this property, which is a 3-unit property at 830 Maple, and he bought it in February of 22, and he says that he moved onto it in January 1st of 2023. He is the sole owner, and the property only has 3 units, so it meets both the ownership and the unit requirements for the exemption. He has to prove that he's lived on the property for at least 120 days before the submission of his application. And he did provide the utility, financial, and government records that support his claim. He also doesn't own any other property in Los Angeles County. The tenants on the property also confirmed Mr. McLean's occupancy. For those reasons, staff recommends that you grant the exemption and adopt the proposed findings of fact and conclusions of law.
Thank you for that. We have no request to speak. Would anyone want to discuss or make a motion?
I will make a motion that we grant the application and adopt the findings of fact and conclusions of law as presented by staff.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Can you please call the roll?
Yes, Commissioner Ivanov,
Yes.
Commissioner Gonska,
Yes.
Commissioner Gwynn,
Yes.
Vice Chair Leslie,
Yes.
Chair Foster,
Yes.
motion carries.
All right. And moving on to 10A2, 1824 12th Street, applicant A. Costa. Applicant seeks an exemption for the unit as new construction. Can we have a staff report, please?
Sure. Commissioners, Andrea Costa, who owns that property at 1824 12th, since 2000, built a new 2-story single-family dwelling on the property, which received its certificate of occupancy on March 2nd, 2023. Because this unit was constructed after the adoption of the rent control law in 1979 and is not otherwise subject to the rent control law because it's not a conversion of an existing structure or otherwise subject to it through the Ellis Act or a removal permit, staff recommends that you grant the exemption and adopt the proposed findings of fact and conclusions of law.
Thank you. Any discussion, or can someone make a motion, please?
I'll motion that we exempt the home as new construction and adopt the proposed findings of fact and conclusions of law.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, we've had a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Yes, Commissioner Gonska,
Yes.
Commissioner Gwynn,
Yes.
Commissioner Ivanov,
Yes.
Vice Chair Leslie,
Yes.
Chair Foster,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you very much. All right, we're going to move on to 10B1, a decrease petition on 1138 Princeton Street, Unit B. The appellant is the owner, and the owner appeals the rent decrease awarded for maintenance conditions and reduced housing services. Can we please have a staff report?
Certainly. Commissioners, tenant Fadi Mualef filed a rent decrease petition alleging various maintenance conditions and reductions of housing services. The hearing officer granted decreases totaling $835, and the landlord has appealed that decision. The landlord argues that the record doesn't support the decreases granted for the loss of the garage amenity, but the decrease granted of $435 in this matter is in accordance with the range that the board has in its regulations for this amenity, and it reflects the fact that the garage space was indoors, it was secured, it was only shared with 2 other tenants, and it also reflects the high MAR that Ms. Mualef pays, and is consistent with the decreases granted on this property for other tenants who have also lost their garages. The landlord also argues that the record doesn't support the decrease granted for the loss of the laundry facility, but that decrease of $150 is again in accordance with the range that's set forth in the board's regulation, and it reflects the intensive use that Ms. Mualef, who is an elderly woman with serious medical issues, puts to that amenity, and again, it reflects her high MAR. The landlord also argued that the hearing officer shouldn't have granted a decrease for loss of access to the rear security gate because they have erected a construction fence, and they said that they did so in accordance with the guidelines that are given by the fire marshal. That specific evidence, though, was not in the record. So it's not something for you to consider. Moreover, the fact that a construction fence was set up to mitigate fire safety concerns doesn't change the fact that the amenity was taken away and eliminated. And finally, the landlord argues that no decrease should have been given for a courtyard, the loss of a courtyard amenity. The landlord says that this wasn't a courtyard, it was merely a walkway to a trash area, but that was not in the record. In fact, the only thing that was in the record from the landlord on this was that the counsel for the landlord said that the courtyard amenity would be restored after construction. The record, however, provides uncontroverted evidence that that was a courtyard amenity that was used by the tenants, and it also has been eliminated. Substantial evidence supports the hearing officer's decisions and findings of fact, and for that reasons, staff recommends that you affirm that decision and adopt its findings of fact and conclusions of law.
Thank you. We do not have any requests to speak on this particular item. We will enter discussion. Does any board member wish to discuss this item at length or make a motion?
I just wanted to make a quick comment, and that's just
Commissioner
that,
Gwynn.
These, as we've seen more of these coming to us, these are difficult decisions that have to be made when parking is involved, as we've seen in the past. And I'm just glad that we're able to make this person more whole than typically we might be able to, because we can't make people whole in these situations. That's not our job. It's to go by the rules and regulations. But I feel that the numbers that we came up, that our hearing officer came up with, are fair, and I certainly wish Ms. Moloff well, because I understand she has issues that make this difficult for her.
Thank you, Commissioner Gwynn. Vice Chair Leslie.
So on page 4, I was kind of confused as I was reviewing the case. Is this a garage or is it a storage area?
Referring to the photo
The photo on page 4
with the plastic.
of 14. Then you look at the top. Yeah, what is that? Because there's nothing stating what it is or what is it supposed to be, or yes, absolutely.
This is submitted by the landlord.
But he
And
didn't.
we would need to know if it's part of the record before we can consider it.
Yeah,
I'm just
this
wondering
is
what it
something that
is.
was submitted by the owner that we didn't address because it's not something that we saw in the
What-
record. And I honestly, it looks like the garage space, but it's unclear to us, and it's not in the record, and so it's really not something that you need to be considering in the landlord's appeal. It doesn't.
Not so much for consideration. I just wanted clarity as far as what is it. I mean, it'd been nice to know, what am I looking at? Was this, am I looking at the part of the apartment? Is this part of the laundry room, or?
It's part of the garage.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no other requests for discussion in the queue, would someone like to make a motion on this item? Commissioner Gonska.
I motion that we affirm the hearing officer's decision and findings of fact and conclusions of law.
I second that motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. If you could please call the roll.
Yes, Commissioner Gwynn,
Yes.
Commissioner Ivanov,
Yes.
Commissioner Gonska,
Yes.
Vice Chair Leslie,
Yes.
Chair Foster.
Yes, that appeal is denied. All right, item 10B2, another appeal of a decreased petition, 826 Second Street, Unit 102. The appellant is Howard Management Group, the property owner. The owner appeals rent decreases awarded for maintenance conditions and reduced housing services. May we please have a staff report?
Certainly, Commissioners, tenant Tea Talhedi filed a rent decrease petition alleging various maintenance conditions and reductions of housing services for which he received $600 in decreases. The landlord appealed the decision and argues that the decreases shouldn't have been granted because the tenant interfered with the repairs. But the record doesn't bear that out. In fact, the landlord submitted email correspondence for this period, and the email correspondence did not show that she was, in fact, in any way interfering with the access to repairs. They were things about inquiring about the status of the repairs or asking for the repair crew to knock on the door before they come in or come in after her Zoom meeting at noon, but nothing of the sort. Moreover, the tenant was actually forced to temporarily relocate in order for this plumbing issue to be completed. And months after she was relocated, the hearing took place, and there was no evidence that the hearing had taken place. I'm sorry, that the repairs had taken place despite her absence from the unit. Substantial evidence supports the hearing officer's decision, and the decrease is granted. Staff recommends that you affirm it and its findings of fact and conclusions of law.
Thank you. We do have 2 requests to speak on this item. First will be Daniel Sloan, and second will be the tenant. Daniel Sloan has requested 2 minutes. Daniel Sloan? And in appeals, we ask for you to restrict your comments to matters in the record or as to any potential errors in the decision. Thank you. Go ahead when you're ready.
Sure. Thank you for having me. No, I mean, this was not, I mean, I'm not going to try and retry the case here. This case, from our position, was difficult in the sense that when our vendors went to the property, they were often turned away. They were asked to adjust their schedules, and when a vendor goes to a property, sometimes they can't make those accommodations the day of. They also have schedules that they have to be adhered to. This was essentially also a case where our contractors and vendors took the proper protocols in obtaining the correct permits, following the rules and regulations with environmental concerns, asbestos testing, mold post testing, the whole 9 yards. And we feel we asked the board to modify the MAR decrease because a lot of that time, I'd say 3 months of it was a waiting period for those permits to close, where we virtually could do nothing. And that's the basis for this appeal this evening. And I'll end with that.
Thank you very much. All right. Taya Tahari, you can come on up for your comment, and you have requested up to 5 minutes, and you may have some. When you're ready, take your time.
So, my name is Taya Tahari, and I have lived in this at this property since 1989. That is 34 years. My ordeal started 14 months ago, and it's still going on because Howard Management refused to pay my relocation fees and refused appealed this, and I didn't plan to come here and speak until I saw the reasons for appeal they filed. And when I saw the reasons, I don't know if you're familiar, you read them, my blood pressure just shot off the roof. They are accusing me of harassing people, intimidating groups of people, turning them away, and extorting money from. This is so ridiculous. You know, there is a saying, the bigger the lie, the easier people believe it. So I think that's their business motto, because it's unbelievable. That's why I compelled to come here and defend myself. I went out of my way to coordinate people coming and cleaning, doing their job. I helped them to find parking spot. I treated them with tea, coffee, and everything. And all of a sudden, I hear this. This is so ridiculous. Anyways, I wanted to make this point. If I am such a bad person, if I harass their vendors, if I interfered with everything, how come in 8 months that they put me through 9 circles of hell, they never sent me an email or a text asking me to stop harassing? How come? There's no even one email. There is no even one text addressed to me asking me or warning me to stop doing it. Is it a reasonable question? Secondly, they are saying that $17,000 they spent, which I think is a very exaggerated amount. But anyway, $17,000 they spent on repairs. I should say that this unit was built 45 years ago. When I moved in, it had the old 70s carpet. I don't know what they call it, like
Shag.
green color in one room, brown in the other room. I hired people, painted the apartment, got a new refrigerator, carpeted everything. And I did that for years and years and years. The only time the owner agreed to do anything in this apartment was in 2019 or 20th, when I had 2 other floodings. I had 3 floodings in the same bathroom at the same spot and involving the same pipes. And the reason I had them 3 times, because they were just doing patching work. And finally, the 3rd time, they had to actually spend money and do something serious. So the owner, the only time, in 2018, I asked the owner if he can replace the carpeting, because I did that 3 or 4 times during the years, maybe every 10 years. And he said, no, he is not going to do it. Then I asked for credit. Again, he said no. And finally, when I had the 2nd flooding, the carpet got so damaged beyond repair that they had to replace it. That was one expense they had in 45 years. And the second expense they had, they replaced the original stove. You know, those old 70s stoves, they replaced that. That's all the expenses they ever had in 45 years. How is $17,000 too much? Then
That's your time. Thank you so much. That's okay. You did fine. All right. Thank you so much. All right, that will close public comment on the item, and we will enter discussion. Do any board members, Commissioner Gwynn, I saw you in the queue earlier, but you took your name out. Does anybody want to kick it off?
He's going to kick it off. I did, when Mr. Sloan was up here, did you mention that permitting?
Your microphone is not on for the public's recording.
Did you mention that permitting was part of the reason that you wanted a change in the duration of this? Is that what you were asking?
If you need to call, we'll need to
Yeah,
call him
if
back
you
to the
can.
microphone to answer a clarifying question. And we will limit it to that.
Yes, you mentioned permitting in your thing, and that wasn't mentioned in your appeal. Are you saying that you're asking because of the permitting to change the range of the dates we're talking to give the decrease for?
Yes.
Okay.
Counsel?
We're limited to what was actually in his appeal.
Oh, I understand that.
Yeah.
I'm just clarifying what he was coming from. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, thank you so much. You can have a seat. Any other discussion on this item? Seeing none, if someone will There's no name in the queue.
I was this close to putting my name in the queue.
He didn't. But he did not.
There you go.
Commissioner Gonska.
So I understand that the permitting is not entered into the record, therefore we cannot consider it. If it had been entered into the record and there was evidence that was entered into the record, would that be something that could potentially be that would be considered as something to potentially change the time frame or impact the decision to reduce Amar?
Nope.
Yeah, I think at this point, it's impossible to speculate about that. I mean, he would have had to have introduced that at the hearing below, and then the hearing officer would have had to consider that. I think given the fact that there's evidence in the record that the tenant was actually relocated to do this work, indicates an understanding of the owner that they had everything they needed to do the work during that time. But again, that would need to have been addressed during the hearing itself.
Yeah, I do just want to also, I don't have any further questions, but.
No, just
Okay.
discussion.
Great.
It's fine.
So on the point of, that was raised tonight about the tenant, preventing the vendors from doing work when they showed up to do it, in the record, it states that the landlord did not provide any evidence of that, and all the evidence that was provided by either party does not show any interference to that work being done. So because of that, I will be voting to affirm the hearing officer's decision.
All right, seeing no other comment, would anyone like to make a motion on this item? Commissioner Gwynn.
Yes, I move that we deny the appeal and accept the findings of fact and conclusions of law as presented.
And I'll second that.
All right, we've had a motion made and a second. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Ivanov,
Yes.
Commissioner Gonska,
Yes.
Commissioner Gwynn,
Yes.
Vice Chair Leslie,
Yes.
Chair Foster.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you. Moving on to item 10B3, a decrease petition appeal for 1120 Arizona Avenue, Unit 3. The appellant is Kay Staben, the tenant. Tenant appeals the denial of rent decreases for alleged maintenance conditions and reductions of housing services. May we have a staff report, please?
Certainly, Commissioners. Tenant Kate Staben filed a rent decrease petition alleging various maintenance conditions and reductions of housing services. The hearing officer, however, found that she did not prove her claim by a preponderance of the evidence, and which is her evidentiary burden as petitioner, and denied her any rent decreases. She has appealed the decision and argues that the record did support decreases for those conditions, but the record doesn't bear that out. The hearing investigator's report did not find any support for the above maintenance conditions that were alleged by Ms. Staben, and nor was any support provided by the testimony regarding code enforcement, including specific testimony by the building and safety supervisor, James Brewster, who visited the property to check on the issues, the complaints about noise from the upstairs unit, from a potentially defective window or otherwise. Given the evidence that was provided in this, in the record, the hearing officer found that she failed to prove her claim, and because that decision is reasonably supported by the evidence in the record, staff recommends that you affirm it.
Thank you so much for that. We do have one request to speak on this. Ms. Staben?
I have a couple of questions of staff.
Okay, and before you take the mic, you can approach, but before you take the mic, go ahead, Commissioner, go with your questions for staff.
Yeah, on page 3 of the staff report on the noise from upstairs unit, the last sentence in there, it says Ms. Staben had failed to prove that the windows in the upstairs unit are broken. That really, there can be no decrease given for that, even if the windows were found broken. Is that correct?
I'm just trying to catch up with you. I see what you're, there where you're, 1 second. It wouldn't be for, it certainly wouldn't be
For her.
For the broken windows itself wouldn't necessarily be a basis for a decrease, but she was making a claim that there was something wrong, either structurally or otherwise, and that was causing noise that was in some ways a basis for her to obtain a decrease. The hearing officer didn't find any support for that, so it didn't even get to the issue.
Okay, because so it wasn't so much the windows themselves, but if there was a structural issue that made that come into her apartment, the noise, then it would be.
The statement is quite persistent that there is
Right.
noise issues. It just wasn't anything that was able to be proven in the record that would and warrant a rent decrease.
And the clarification on the noise issue is that we can't give a decrease for noise itself, but we can give a decrease for noise as a result of something like that, a structural issue.
Right, a building code violation, some issue related to that.
And the last question that, to clarify just for that, is in the construction decreases, we can give a decrease because of noise, but that is because of the construction.
That's right. In a construction decrease petition, which is where there's construction is causing all kinds of impacts, the impacts, a typical impact from construction is, of course, noise, along with dust or things like that. This is not that kind of a case. This is a standard decrease petition that was filed.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Staben, you may approach. Just a moment. Oh, you're right. There is. Yep. Thank you so much. It got pushed back. Ms. Staben, go ahead.
Okay.
When you're ready.
I am ready as I will ever be. I'd also just like to state, as it is in all the evidence that I submitted, that I have a generalized anxiety disorder and PTSD, and so this is very difficult for me. And so if I need to take a break and if I'm shaking, I apologize.
You're doing fine. Take your time.
I'd like to just say this is an issue of habitability. It's not just like, oh, a window opened and there's just noise and I'm bothered by it. Like, we live in a city, there's noise. I submitted numerous sound files to show how loud the noise actually is. And when it happens in the middle of the night and it wakes me up and I can't sleep. And it is very clear that these windows need maintenance upstairs. And maybe they're not in my apartment, but they are directly affecting how I live. Another point that was just brought up was Jim Brewster that came at my request, and my landlord intercepted him. And so the issues that I had brought up, he didn't even look at, and that's in the testimony. You'll also find in Maureen Mitchell's testimony towards the very end that she states that the upstairs unit is loud, and someone like me who suffers from a generalized anxiety disorder and trouble sleeping and chronic migraines should never have rented that unit because it is very noisy. So she contradicts her own testimony. She says it right there. I submitted, like I said before, video files, countless noise recordings. There were police report numbers because of the noise upstairs, which again goes into a habitability issue. Sorry.
It's okay. You're doing fine.
It has made my life miserable for over a year. And it's not even about the money. I would just like it to stop. And I think so many things were overlooked. I had witnesses. There are countless text threads from other tenants who have subsequently had to move out because of what's going on. In one of the documents I submitted, because I believe this is just she didn't want to fix things because she wants me to move. I think a constructive eviction is the proper term for it. She emailed my old landlord, my prior landlord, 7 months into my tenancy and lied and said that I was a new applicant to gain information about me. This woman doesn't want me to live there because she doesn't like that I make constant complaints. I have done everything in my power to work around these things, to put noise machines up, to just deal, and I get nothing back. The other thing with the plumbing, when the hearings officer came in, or sorry, when the inspector came in, the issue that I have been dealing with is something that you'd have to just stand in my shower and deal with. And Maureen testified that she sent a plumber out in November after I had been cleaning for 2 months, and she avoided that for 2 months. The plumber came in, he told me there was an issue, Maureen denied that, and then she never sent anybody. And I don't know how she can in the statement from the hearing officer, it says she credibly testified that there was no plumbing, but it would stand that you would just send a plumber out to really fix it. Like, I'm a tenant, and I tried, believe me, I tried to get plumbers out to like do it on my own to show, but no one would come out because I don't own the building. And I've been completely powerless in this situation. And I'd just like someone to take a look at it, because this city constantly touts publicly on social media, in newspapers, how we have the greatest renters protections in the state. And in my experience, I have just been passed along, treated like nothing, dismissed constantly. And I worked very hard to put as much evidence I can together, having witnesses, and I've tried relentlessly just to make my life livable on a daily basis. And I've been met with opposition by the city at every point. I've gotten so far that I've had the state involved now. And I would like to not take it that far. I would not like to invite the LA County. I would like it to be dealt here. But it hasn't been, and my health, beyond my mental health and conditions, my physical health has declined because of this. Because you can't, it's like, everybody knows right now what it is like to just rent, and just moving is not an option. And so I would just like you to really thoroughly take into account all the evidence I've submitted, testimony, visuals, everything. And that's really all I have to say.
Okay, thank you very much for your statement. All right. We have Maureen Mitchell. It's requested up to 5 minutes when you're ready.
I just drove down from Washington, so I'm tired. I don't know, there's a list of things. I don't remember any of my tenants leaving for any other reason that they gave me 30 days notice and left, nothing because of anything we did. Our plumbing is been addressed. The windows are okay upstairs. She's been offered several, up to what rent control would allow in relocation. I realized she's unhappy. And she turned that down. She was offered an apartment on the first floor that's a beautiful apartment that I'm staying in, because I left it empty to see how this was going to go in case she changed her mind. But she doesn't feel it's secure. And that's her choice. I don't want her to leave. I'm not trying to constructively evict her, but she provokes the tenant above her. I let him know that she's not happy. He turns around, and there's 2 5-year-olds, and I'm in the middle trying to tell him, you're not supposed to do this, or so I'm kind of stuck between. But I showed all the repairs. We put in a new garage door. She complained because my daughter takes her daughter to school in the morning, and the door shuts in the garage, and she lets us know that that's waking her up. And my son-in-law does work for FedEx, and he goes to work at 5:30. So the garage door is a little better now. It's brand new. And 75% of her apartment is under carpet. Carpet is above. Unfortunately, this is the only unit in the building that the bathroom is over her bedroom. So, and the gentleman upstairs is 72, and I don't think anybody here is 72. But I'm 81, and I get up in the night. I can't tell him when to use the bathroom. I can't regulate when he takes a shower. And I'm shit. I'm not doing that because I'm just tired. But we've tried. My daughter and I have tried. And I don't know what else we can do. And the civil rights people, they have got my paperwork, and we're waiting on that to see if I haven't harassed her. We haven't intimidated her. We haven't done anything other than just trying to run a build this. We're original owners of the building for 65 years. And this is the first time this has happened. So, yeah, and it's a 65-year-old building. And I didn't waylay the code enforcement guy. He came up to us, and we let him in the unit upstairs, and he walked the whole unit and checked everything. And he spoke at the hearing. We tried. So I don't know what else we can do, but she has been given reasonable accommodation options. which she's chosen to turn down. And I never said people like her shouldn't have rented this unit or whatever. I've said that if you do have these mental issues since you were 14 years old, we didn't know that the apartment was any noisier than any other unit because no one's ever complained in that unit before. The girl before may have made a couple of comments, and I have letters about that. So we've given her different options because we realized that maybe she's, she's not happy there. But I don't know what else to do for her. So we've tried. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. All right. That concludes the comments on this item. We will enter discussion. Does anybody want to discuss the parts of this case? All right, seeing none, I will say, in a decrease appeal, whether it's brought by a landlord or by a tenant, all we can do is look at the record and look at error. We are not allowed to listen and substitute our judgment for that of the hearings officers. If this board feels that the hearing officers followed the law and that any reasonable person would have reached the same conclusion that they did based on the facts and evidence, then we uphold their ruling. And I see no clear error in any part of this. There are lots of facets of landlord-tenant law. There are lots of facets of being a landlord and being a tenant, and they're not always easy. And they can't all be solved here at the rent board through petitions. So I wish you both well, both parties well, and hope that you can find ways to get along. Commissioner Gonska, did I see you?
Yeah. No, I would just echo a lot of what you said. I think, as you mentioned, our only role here can be to look at what is in the record and to look at if there were any errors made by the hearing officer in the process. And I just want to echo especially something you said, that if any reasonable person could have come to the conclusions that the hearing officer came to, our duty is to uphold that decision, even if we would have made a different decision. And there are often cases, arguably this case, where somebody could have made a different decision, but that doesn't mean, just because somebody could have made a different decision doesn't mean that there were errors made in the decision that was made by the hearing officer. And so, I think that I know that we're bound by what is in the record, and I've read this report and the evidence submitted thoroughly, looking for anything that could potentially have been an error that could allow us to reverse the decision, and found none. So I think based upon that, I'll be voting to uphold the hearing officer's decision.
All right. Would you like to make a motion while you're on it?
Sure. I would move that we affirm the hearing officer's decision, and I lost my place here. I don't have that memorized. And affirm the hearing officer's decision and findings of fact and conclusions of law.
Is there a second?
I second the motion.
All right. We have a motion made and a second. Please call the roll.
Yes, Commissioner Gonska,
Yes.
Commissioner Gwynn,
Yes.
Commissioner Ivanov,
Yes.
Vice Chair Leslie,
Yes.
Chair Foster.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. And as I stated earlier, we moved item 11A to a future date. And so we're moving on to item 12A, the consideration of a new classification for information resources analyst position. We have a staff report.
Yes, thank you. So this is a request for the board to adopt a new classification, specification, and salary range for the position of Information Resources Analyst. This position will replace the current Database Coordinator position. The proposed change is prompted in part by changes in the responsibilities of the Database Coordinator and in part as succession planning in anticipation of the eventual retirement of some long-term employees. As a result of the implementation of the new Infor property and rent tracking system and the retirement of the systems administrator, programmer, analyst in 2022, the duties of the database coordinator have changed. Most of the technical responsibilities and infrastructure support aspects of the database have been, or that the systems administrator handled, those have been transferred to the technical services analyst position in ISD, which supports the infrastructure of the system. But there are other aspects of the systems analysts that were picked up by this person, in part dealing with some of the backup, monitoring the backup of the system, and dealing with some of the information we pull from the tax assessor's files. Additionally, the new database system requires different responsibilities. We have integrations with a number of systems, payment processing systems, the tax assessor's database, and our document management system. So the database coordinator has assumed those responsibilities of working with the vendors who provide those services, and this is not a responsibility that we had in the past. It requires a high degree of coordination with those vendors and some level of independence and independent decision-making on the aspects of working with those vendors. Additionally, we have vendors who support the document management system. Currently, the office coordinator oversees those responsibilities and has worked with the document management system vendors. But I think that it's appropriate for the going forward to have these responsibilities under one person so that it's very clear who is responsible for interacting with the vendors for both of these systems. So if this position is approved, we will transition the document management system support to the information resources analyst. Throughout the development of the database over the past few years, we've had a great core team of people who have worked on the project, including the database coordinator. I served as the project manager through that process, and so I have continually worked with the vendor TruePoint Solutions who implemented the database with us. But I will transition those responsibilities to the information resources analyst, and then she will assume the ongoing communications with the TruePoint Solutions as well. So that's a whole new aspect that this database has introduced. She will continue to do some of the responsibilities that were the responsibilities of the database coordinator, like producing system documentation and training staff on how to use the new system. We'll be doing that as a group, just as we developed the project, but she will be producing a lot of the documentation for the system. So this proposed class spec, after we prepared it, was reviewed by the city's Human Resources Department, and based upon the level of responsibility for the position, and in consultation with the city's customer service and support manager in information services, who's an expert on this type of responsibility, they recommended that the salary be set at a level comparable to a senior administrative analyst or a position similar to this that requires a lot of subject-specific knowledge and works as an intermediary between the technical resources. And there's a position like that in the transportation department, senior transportation analyst, which is comparable. The salary range is comparable to the senior administrative analyst. So having received that recommendation from the Human Resources Department, I met with the representatives of the Employees Action Committee because the database coordinator position is a position within the EAC, and our memorandum of understanding with them says that if we're contemplating creating a new position, before we bring it to the board, we meet with them to discuss the qualifications and to negotiate the compensation. So we met with them. They were supportive of both the qualifications that are specified in the classification specification and the compensation level. And we hope this will provide perhaps an opportunity for advancement or promotion for one of these employees in the future when the current person retires. So we're recommending that the board approve the classification specification and the salary range that you received. And this position will be assumed by Jean Phillips, who is our current database coordinator, and the database coordinator position will be eliminated. That's the staff report, and happy to answer any questions.
Very thorough. Thank you very, no, it's great. Thank you very much. I think it's important that the public hears about what we do behind the scenes and how much really goes into the administration of this department. Commissioner Gwynn.
Yeah, I just want to mention that I'm glad that we're going into the succession plan. I think there's many pieces that are going to happen after Tracy leaves, but this is a real integral one as far as I'm concerned because of some of the things that are being put into this position, and having experience working with staff and these things, it's the perfect, I think, remedy for these things, and knowing Jean as well that she's a good fit for this until future things happened. I did have one question though, Executive Director, and that is, can you just explain a little bit more the connection between this position and the technical services analyst that you mentioned?
Sure. So you'll remember that we, when you approve the budget, we have a position within the budget, which is the technical services analyst. And that person, that employee, resides in the city's information services department. You know, as systems have gotten more complex, we used to have like our own little system and we were completely independent, but that's not an option anymore. The interrelatedness of all of the city's databases is key, and the infrastructure, the storage space and the servers and all of that has gotten very complex. So the technical services analyst has handled that aspect, the infrastructure aspect of things, as well as the person who had that position worked with us on the development of the database. And that, hopefully we will be filling that position shortly. It's been vacant for a little while, but ISD has been recruiting, and it looks like we have something that will happen fairly soon. So that person will also support the Infor database. They will work with the TruePoint vendors that develop the system, but eventually we would like this person to, do the modifications to the system that will be necessary. So the information resources analyst is the subject expert, knows the data that we use, knows the needs of the users, and can work with the users closely to then communicate to the technical people what we need the system to do or what modifications we need. So the technical services analyst will actually implement those changes, but the information resources analyst will work very closely with the person to do that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gonska.
Can you speak to the difference in the salary range between the position that will be eliminated and this one? I definitely understand that there are different responsibilities. So I'm not raising this as necessarily a problem, but can you speak to that and just sort of any budgetary impact in the current fiscal year? And if there is a budgetary impact, if that's been contemplated?
It has been contemplated. I was envisioning that we would eventually do this. So there's always some room, there are salary savings. For example, the technical services analyst position has been vacant, so we haven't been paying that salary and those benefits. So we have savings there that will help with this adjustment. This position really requires a high level of subject-specific knowledge, independent decision-making, authority, and in-depth knowledge of the design and implementation of the new system. So it's a higher level of responsibility. The difference in the top level of the compensation, you see the grid here. The top level annual is $125,796. The database coordinator is, the top level is $102,564. So what is that, about
23, 22
20,
change.
yeah. So this person will not start at the top of the grid. There's a provision within the EAC contract that specifies when someone has a promotion, what compensation level they must be put at on the grid. And that's what we will be doing, putting her at step 3 of the grid.
I have a question. So I have no problem with anything you've presented. It's very thorough and it's very clear why it's needed. I'm fine with all of that. As the position grows and as the database grows and in potential coordination with the city to an even larger database, is this a position that could morph into something that I'm speculating? We've all speculated that if there were a position created or a database created that put more burden on our agency, is this a position that could help absorb that burden? Is there room at the top of the growth?
Well, I think you're referring to the council's discussion of potentially requiring the registration of non-controlled units.
Right.
We at the Rent Control Agency would not be in charge of that. We would certainly work with whoever it is that the city would hire to do that, but we provide services with respect to the controlled rental units. It is certainly possible that our database may be a foundation that could be used and modified to easily implement a whole nother piece of this, but there will have to be city staff to provide that. But yes, this person could provide some expertise and, collaborate as we do with other city departments on things, but we would not be responsible for the registration of non-controlled units.
Okay. This item requires a motion to be made to accept it. So,
I'll make a motion that
all right.
accept the job specifications as presented by staff.
Thank you.
I make a motion that we accept the job specifications as presented by staff.
Is there a second?
I second the motion.
All right. You please call the roll.
Yes, Commissioner Ivanov,
Yes.
Commissioner Gonska,
Yes.
Commissioner Gwynn,
Yes.
Vice Chair Leslie,
Yes.
Chair Foster.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. Great.
Thank you.
Moving on to our final item of the evening. It's a board discussion item. It's item 14A by Commissioners Gwynn and Ivanov. Request of Commissioners Gwynn and Ivanov to discuss having a board retreat when the new executive director has joined the agency. Among the topics to be considered for agendizing at the retreat are the Brown Act and Robert's Rules of Order, the transition for the new executive director, the board's interactions with the public during appeals, public hearings, public comments, and the board's role in advocating generally for rent control policies and protections. Gentlemen, who wants to present?
Get us off. We bring this up, it's been kind of hinted at in the last year that maybe a retreat would be something that would be as used to this board. As we know, other than Chair Foster, we're all fairly new to this in the overall perspective. And so I think it would be great to have a retreat, and what a retreat would be, as happens with the city council and other, we could meet in an informal atmosphere to more discuss, unlike in this formal situation, back and forth, to talk about things that wouldn't necessarily be put on an agenda. And the public is still welcome to attend these, but it would typically not be held in the council chambers. It would be, I think what our vision is that if we do hold this retreat, we'd leave it to staff to find some place to hold this down the road, and they would also be the ones that determine the timing of it. As far as the things that we thought we could cover, these are the things that Danny and I came up with as possibilities without becoming too restrictive and bordering on rules and regulations and things like that. So one of them is the Brown Act and Robert's Rules. I think we all sometimes question just how the Brown Act really impacts us when we go to different things as two or one or whatever number of groups, when we can be there as 5, when we can be there as 2. And so Robert's Rules, of course, that's always nice to have just a refresher. And I think in this case, we'd look at staff to bring us something as a general thing to guide us by on those 2 topics. And the other one, which I think could be one of the most useful to us, actually, and something that we kind of work on our own sometimes, and that's advocacy. And I think it'd be interesting to go back and forth on what our ideas of advocacy is for rent control topics and that. And obviously, Anastasia and Erica, you've been in this arena for a long time and advocating. So I think your expertise obviously would be valuable, but I think we could also furnish that. So those are two things we thought would be possibilities, and I'll let Danny talk about the other two.
Yeah, so the remaining categories that Commissioner Gwynn and I discussed were having a session on the transition between, Tracy and the new executive director. If we were to have this retreat, we think the timing would make sense to have it be done specifically during the overlap period, which we think at this point would likely be December or January based on our interview schedule. And I think the point of that is this will give us an opportunity to hear from the new executive director, find out what's going well, what's not going well. To the extent that things are not going well in certain areas, we can answer their questions, figure out how to solve the issue, just build a rapport with them in general personally. So that's one category. And then the other issue that we had listed was our interaction with the public during public comment and appeals. I think the reason I really advocated for having that one was because I often find that, here on the dais, I have a question and I hesitate to ask it because I'm not sure if it's kind of outside of our wheelhouse and whether we can ask that question. And our guiding principle up to this point with appeals has been, clarifying questions. But I feel like it would really be helpful for everyone if we could have a comprehensive kind of session on the kinds of questions that can and can't be asked. I think that would be helpful for everyone. And with that, I think our remaining questions are, for the rest of the board, what we want to hear is, do you think it's necessary to have a retreat at all? And if you do, outside of these four categories, are there any other issues that you would want to discuss or think would be helpful to include?
Awesome. Fantastic. Yes, I would say wholeheartedly. Yes. And it's not just because we had, for my opinion about this, it's not just because we had quite a bit of turnover and churn on this board, such as we don't usually see. But it's also because every one of us can use all of these things and these refreshers. It's a great example to set for other boards and commissions and elected bodies, and we can always learn more. I think, another area we could potentially add or just cover by nature of being there together is the difference between, what the board's role is. Like, start at the very top. What are our roles and responsibilities? I serve on charitable boards, and sometimes we go over that. We go over it every year. What are the board's roles and responsibilities? That could be a nice way maybe to start it off. And then I also think it'd be useful to examine the relationship between board and staff, and a recognition that staff does this, 40, 50, 60 hours a week. And different elected bodies are active or not active, siloed or not siloed, armchair Monday morning or much more active role. And I think because we serve in sort of a legislative and quasi-judicial capacity, it's really incumbent upon us to understand our duties and our roles and our responsibilities. And I think staff could really help with that. And the transition time is absolutely a stroke of genius because, yes, why not thoroughly redefine it for ourselves? That could help Tracy in preparing the monstrous rule book, the owner's manual for the next lucky person to occupy that chair. So this all seems like a wonderful idea and fantastic timing. Thank you. Do we need a motion for that? It's consensus, and we'll wait to hear back from staff as to what you feel is appropriate. It is the holidays time, so maybe early January is the best time, kind of when we're all back from whatever kinds of celebrations we're having.
I think as Commissioner Ivanov said, it will kind of depend on the timing of how things work out in terms of the transition. But I too think this is a really good idea and very timely.
Great. Wonderful. Well, if there's nothing else, and I don't think there is, I move we adjourn. All right, all those in favor of adjournment, say aye. Aye.
Okay, before you all leave,
Turn our mics off. Thank you, CV. Good night.